Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things Odd. I'm Dr. Natalie Phillips.
And I'm Dr. Hannah Galloway.
And we're laughing because just before we started this, because we're like, boy, we haven't been on the show for a long time.
I feel like I haven't done the show in a while.
I apologize. I was traveling for March Madness and for basketball, and we just haven't been doing the show. But we have some special guests for you today. So hang in there. We're going to get to them. I'm going to have Dr. Galloway share a little bit about our YouTube, which we're definitely getting some good traction. So thank you, guys.
Yes. So this is our YouTube. If you go and put in our business name, you can kind of see all of the different videos. There's fun thumbnails, so you can kind of tell what they're about. And they're easier to send to somebody that doesn't have Facebook or whatever. So you can kind of watch multiple videos in a row if you want. But yeah, we keep getting more subscribers. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we're trying to keep adding more content. So.
All right, so I'm going to take that down, and I'm still sharing to some of our groups, our audiology groups, so that way they can kind of join in with us here. But without further ado, I am going to take that off and introduce our awesome guests for the afternoon. So we are with Shari Eberts and Gael Hannan, and they're hearing health advocates, consultants, speakers, and authors who offer skills-based approach to hearing loss. And it's not just centered on hearing better, but communicating better. So they have a new book out called Here and Beyond. Right here.
We actually have a signed copy.
Yeah,
fangirls here.
And so then in this book, it's really cool. They share their own hearing loss journeys, and they outline strategies to help you engage with the world and to be heard. So we're going to talk about their book. But before we get to their book, we'd like to introduce them and have some questions for them. So we're going to just kind of put up a little ticker here, and we're going to ask them some questions. So welcome, ladies, to the show. Thank you for joining us. But I'd like to kind of do a round robin, which, we can go to Shari first, then we can go to Gael. But one of our first questions for you is, when did you discover that you had a hearing loss? So we'll start with Shari first.
Okay, great. And thanks so much for having us. This is a lot of fun. So I first noticed my hearing loss when I was in my mid-20s. But my journey with hearing loss really began well before that, watching my father struggle with his own hearing loss issues. He was really, really stigmatized by it. And watching him, hide it and be embarrassed by it really had a large impact on how I viewed my hearing loss when I first discovered it when I was in business school.
And what about you, Gael?
Well, I guess I first discovered I had hearing loss when my mommy told me when I was 2.5. So it was congenital, cause unknown, lots of the usual suspects that discovered it 2.5. And it was progressive. So mild as a child, so no hearing aid. This was back in the dark ages of the 50s and 60s. Moderate as a teenager. And then just kept getting more profound until now. So I'm on profound hearing loss, on bimodal hearing aid, cochlear implant.
Awesome. Any other questions about that? So I'm curious. So Gael, since you were at about age 2.5, when did you obtain your first set of hearing aids?
I got my first hearing aid on one single aid on actually the worst side, which is probably not the way they do it anymore, when I was 21. And that's because I said, hello. I mean, they kept saying, no, it's not going to help you, not going to help you. And I said, so at 21, I went to another doctor, had a hearing aid within a month, and it was, to say the least, life-changing. And then a succession of, and I went bilateral hearing aids when I was 40, and then went cochlear on one side.
Wow. And then Shari, you said about 18, right?
No, like my mid-20s. I was in business school, and I was having trouble hearing in class. And I went to that first audiologist, and I got my hearing tested. And they said, you have mild hearing loss, but there's nothing you can do about it. Just go back to class. And I didn't feel like that was particularly helpful way back when at this time, not even, suggesting maybe another seat in the classroom might be helpful or something like that. So I didn't get my first hearing aid probably till a few years later. But because of how stigmatized by hearing loss that I was from watching my father, I didn't really wear them that often in those first few years. So it was sort of like a sneak them in before an important meeting and rip them out afterwards. So it really wasn't until many years later when I had my children and I saw them watching me that I knew I had to set a better example for hearing loss in case they also develop it as adults. And that's when I started wearing my hearing aids, full time. And that was the trick that I needed because that's when my brain really started to adapt to them and they started to be more helpful for me.
Nice.
So for both of you, before you had hearing aids, since you both had a significant amount of time with some hearing loss without hearing aids, what were like tips and tricks that you found that worked for you or that helped you kind of navigate around the hearing loss before you had amplification?
Oh gosh. How did I navigate it? Probably very poorly. I had no role models. I didn't know anyone else with hearing loss. The person who gave me my hearing aid, I think was a hearing instrument specialist. Again, we're talking a zillion years ago. I just bumbled through. I did what I'd always done, sit at the front of the class or made sure I was facing someone. But these were barely conscious thoughts. This is just how I got through conversation. And but again, I didn't have any guidance, peer support, and my parents didn't know. But my parents were good communicators and always drummed into me communication is important. So through that, I suppose that and basic need of being able to understand was being able to see what was going on as well. So again, it was barely conscious. I just sort of fumbled my way through, and things changed, of course, once somewhat, not completely, but when I got a hearing aid.
Yeah, and similar for me. I mean, I think I was doing a lot more lip reading and speech reading than I thought I was. I think I naturally moved myself closer to people and sort of figured out what seat at the table or what seat in the room would be advantageous for me. But, part of the reason that we wrote this book is because those tips and those tricks and all the things that Gail and I use today to live well with our hearing loss were not easily and readily accessible. There was not one place that we could go and look that up. There wasn't a website. There wasn't a book. There wasn't really one place where we could put it all together. And so we're hoping that the book's going to make it easier for people who are sitting in our seat that we were sitting in, maybe even after we got the amplification, but we still didn't have this whole set of skills and attitude change and all these other things that are required in addition to the technology.
So for those of you just joining in or you're kind of tuning in, we're talking with Shari Eberts and Gael Hannan, and they wrote this book right here, Here and Beyond. And so my question too for you, and you guys, we'll talk about how you can get a copy of this as well, or how you can purchase it. But so how did you guys meet and decide like this is something that we have to do?
So I met Shari through other mutual friends in probably at an HLAA, Hearing Loss Association of America convention. And I've been in hearing loss advocacy for over 25 years. And I'm Canadian, so in Canada, but as well in the United States. And so I had been writing and presenting and doing projects for a long time. Met Shari and at a convention, and she and I were both bloggers writing weekly articles, and I knew her focus was really on tips and tricks, which I did as well, but I just came at it from a different way, and we have different styles of writing. So I knew Shari had said to me, I'd like to write a book one day. And I thought, oh, that's competition. And but then when I realized I wanted to write a new book that was, let's go back to basics, I reached out. That's probably not your question. I think I went far beyond that, but that's how we met. And we started this project just really the month the pandemic started, and
Wow.
we've become extremely close friends as well. It was a wonderful creative process.
Awesome. Natalie and I actually saw them speak at Odd Boss, the conference. That's kind of how we all got connected and how we got our book signed. But we really liked your talk. And I think too, we see a lot of pediatric patients thinking about, I have toddlers myself, thinking about being a parent without hearing loss, parenting a child with hearing loss. I think that this book could be really, really helpful because you don't know so much, Shari, you talked about seeing your dad and maybe he didn't navigate it, in a way that might have been the best way to model it, but at least you had, known someone else with hearing loss. I have met parents who they just don't know anybody that has hearing loss, and that, their child has hearing loss. And so learning the tips and tricks and the lifestyle and, what you can do to advocate for your kid too, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. So we have a great question here. So you talk about this mindset shift in your book, right, about approaching hearing loss. And so I know that, especially like what Dr. Galloway talked about too, with just even presenting this hearing loss, right, to parents who maybe might not be expecting it, to people that they think maybe they've come in because their spouse has said, you need to kind of go in and get your hearing checked. So what is this mindset shift that you guys talk about in your book in approaching hearing loss?
Yeah, so we really love this idea of the mind shifts because our attitudes about hearing loss really impact the way that we feel about it and the way that we behave. And so by just changing our thought patterns and the way that we think about the hearing loss, we can live better with it. And so we have a list of different mind shifts, and we sometimes use them as mantras, really, as a way to sort of tell us that, we've got this, right? But like, for example, one of the common attitudes that people might have about their hearing loss is, I don't like to advertise my hearing loss, right? People will think I'm old or slow. And the mind shift really is being open about our hearing loss is going to help us communicate better. And trying to hide our hearing loss is going to lead to misunderstandings. So it's really flipping it on its head and taking a more positive, a more proactive approach and mindset to the hearing loss, which really lets you become an advocate for yourself. And so it's that concept of changing the way you think about it, which changes your behaviors, which changes your success in living with hearing loss.
And I think it also changes, as you say, Shari, your success with technology. So even in myself, I wanted a hearing aid. I thought it could help. But once I got it, I was actually had it in my hand for the first time. I went, it's ugly and it's too big and people are going to think this. And I had to shift that. And when we are more at peace, or we made that shift in our attitude towards hearing loss, we realized that technology is our friend, and we are going to be more patient with the process of getting used to it. And so there's just so many emotions that people with hearing loss go through that have to be addressed. And it's not just from your side as hearing care professionals, it's just not managing our expectations for hearing aids. It's managing our understanding of the whole hearing loss journey, because it is a journey. It's not something that can ever be totally fixed. It's something that be managed as we go forward.
Well, and just like accessories or something like that can be used with, hearing aids and cochlear implants, that's not perfect for every patient. Some people really don't want to mess with those things, but for some people, it opens up the world so much. So just trying to make sure that everybody knows what's out there that could work for them, without trying to feel like I'm overwhelming them with all of this, new stuff.
Yeah. And like Shari, to your point, I remember talking with patients about communication strategies. And one thing is to be assertive. So you can be aggressive, you can be assertive, or you can be passive, right? And so aggressive can be, well, they should know I have a hearing loss and like they should work around me. Passive is just kind of nodding and to anything anybody's saying and hoping that you don't get caught, or that somebody says, oh, by the way, so did you agree with what I said? But assertive is exactly like what you're saying, is just come out with it and say, look, I do have a hearing loss. It would help me if we did this. Either we move here or we do that, or, you slow down a little bit in what you're speaking, or we move away from noise or whatever. So that's the assertive piece. And then Gail, I was laughing because I had gone and talked to a school, so teenagers, about hearing loss and technology. And you're right on point. I used to try to think, oh, we've got to make these things cool for the teenagers. But at the same time, with our adult patients, they get so excited with all the new technology when we're able to show them what it can do, and actually show them that technology makes their life easier, right? If you embrace that. And so I love both of your points in some of those issues and some of those ways that we can have this mind shift as well.
Well, and in some ways, we've all kind of become more connected. So you see a lot of people walking down the street with like earbuds or, some sort of ear accessory. So I feel like too, with the teenagers, like, oh, what's that? How does that work? What can we connect it to? How can we make it, do cooler things for us or whatever? And I feel even people without hearing loss, we have a little slideshow out in our front office that shows, different hearing technology and different things. And people will come back and ask questions, the parents or the loved ones, like, how does this work? Or how could you use that, with your TV or whatever?
Yeah.
Because communication is a two-way street. And I think that is part of the mind shift that we think it's not just for me, it's so for my family, for my partner, my friends, that we work together. And that's why it's so important for the people in our lives to understand hearing loss better than they do. And they're never going to understand it perfectly, but communication is a two-way street. And we have to remember that when I communicate better and you communicate better, then we're better connected.
Yeah. Yeah. And you guys do make that point that it's not just about hearing, it's about communicating, right? So again, if you're just joining, we're talking with Shari and Gael, authors of Hear and Beyond, and also they're hearing advocates as well, and speakers. And so if you have questions for them, please put it in the comments. We can answer them or have them address them as well. But which brings us to our next question about what is your favorite piece of technology that has helped you live with your hearing loss?
Well, I know. I mean, other than my hearing aids, I'm assuming, right? For me, it's speech to text apps. Any kind of captioning really is life-changing for me. And I think if there's one good thing that came out of the pandemic is that availability of captioning in so many places where it didn't exist before. On Zoom, on Google Meet, on all of these ways that we still continue, I think, to interact with people, maybe more than we should now that we can all get back together. But having that captioning, and even just on my phone, if I'm in a challenging situation, there's always a backup and an option for me. And like to your point, Natalie, like I don't have to worry about just hearing it. I have to worry about communicating. And that tool really helps me to communicate better, even when sometimes I'm not hearing as well as I would like.
Do you have a favorite app or one that you find that works better than others? We demoed a couple for this show, but I always like to hear what people are actually using and what they found that works the best.
Yeah, so I think the Zoom captions are really, really good. I'd also like to watch any kind of video or stream any kind of media in the Chrome browser because it has that little pop-up live captioning window, and I think those are very good. And then on my phone, I prefer Otter. I think it just has the best accuracy.
Okay, and that's an app, like something like that is something we've introduced to patients. In a difficult situation, this is like a good backup, or at your doctor's appointment or whatever. But keeping up with which ones are good and aren't going to beg you to give them a ton of money every 5 minutes and all that.
Yeah, they all have somewhat limitations because they're not perfect. And Shari and I think it was Odd Boss. It was Odd Boss. So we're so used to having captioning provided at hearing loss conferences. So this was a hearing care professional, and there was no card. But no problem. We've got our phone. We had it propped up. And the person who was speaking had English was not their first language, although they spoke it well. So there was an accent, and it wasn't doing well. And we're watching, and all of a sudden, I won't say the word, but there was some sexual terms that came up, and we were like, oh my gosh, and yeah. So they have limitations. So I like live transcribe, and I like the little doodah that's on my phone, the live listen, because in a pinch it's there. And can I tell you my favorite piece of technology?
Yes.
It is streaming. So being able to stream. So everything comes through my phone now. So the ability to stream because of profound hearing loss, television. Right now I'm streaming through my mini mic and my phone, and this has been a game changer for me.
Do you stream binaurally, or do you just stream through the implant?
Oh, binaurally. So because I'm bimodal, if I do just the implant or just the hearing aid, it doesn't sound great. So it has to be binaurally, and it's so it works well. It's great.
Awesome. Well, good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So one of our last questions is, what is one of your favorite hearing hacks that can be applied to everything you do?
Well, we love hearing hacks. I don't know how we're going to pick just one, Gail. We have
well, you have to purchase the book and read the rest of your hearing hacks. First of all.
That's right. I mean, we do have some hearing hacks at the front where they apply in all situations. One that I really like is to always choose the best seat. And this applies anywhere that you go, and to make sure you're seated, up front, but not too up front if the speaker's going to be wandering around. So you need to understand sort of what's the lay of the room, what's the speaker going to be doing, where am I going to have the best lighting, where am I going to have the best view of their face, and just get there early and make sure that you pick the best seat for any occasion. So that's sort of a general hearing hack.
Now, I thought you were going to say one of our favorite hearing hacks is a mental checklist that we use, and we call it HEAR, HEAR. So it's hearing. So it's you're in a situation. It's a checklist. So you evaluate: am I hearing okay? If I am, that's great. If not, what do I need to do? Then or what needs to be done, and then you articulate that. HEAR. Oh, and revise it. The R stands for revise and remind. So things change. So you might be sitting outside and things are great, but then a band starts playing, and then you have to make some adjustments. So it's something that many of us may do without realizing it. But once we make it a conscious process, I mean, it happens almost instantaneously. But that is my favorite hearing hack.
Oh. So here is check your hearing, evaluate, articulate, and revise. Is that correct?
Revise and remind, because sometimes people forget if you ask them to speak a little bit louder or slower. They will for about 10 seconds, and then they forget.
True.
But I'm glad you mentioned that one, because that's a hearing hack not only for the person with hearing loss, but for our communication partners as well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when my kids were little, and we would go out to a restaurant, and they soon learned how to do HEAR even better than I did. So we'd walk in, and they would figure out, okay, Mom, this is where the light is, and this is where your back against the wall, and this is where the speaker is. So you sit here, and I'll sit there, and it makes you feel so supported as a person with hearing loss when others are helping you with those hearing hacks and helping you to find that sweet spot for communication.
That's a great point. That's really cool about communication partners too.
Well, and I find we see patients with single-sided deafness, and a lot of times, if they've grown up with single-sided deafness, everyone in their life knows that you don't sit on that side, you sit on the other side or whatever. But some of our patients develop single-sided deafness, and it's very much like informing everyone in their life, I can't hear you from that side, so we have to sort of rework whatever we've been doing in the past.
But I think too, also, that the people in our lives, they do their darndest, but they can't anticipate every single moment. Like, so for example, there's a sound outside that means nothing to them, so they register it. But to me, it now means I'm not understanding you, so they don't necessarily get that. So it's always the poor hearing husband. That's what we call him, the hearing husband. He tries so hard, and then so something doesn't quite work because of whatever happens. So we're always having to remind them or to say, okay, this isn't working for me right now, or and it's learning to do that without frustration or irritation. Is something we all aim for.
Yeah, and I think that, with what Gail's talking about too, for people who are tuning in or you're sharing this show out, what's interesting is to understand is that even with a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, your hearing's still not back up to normal, or you've learned how to hear differently with that aid, whether it's a hearing aid or a cochlear implant. And what Gail's talking about too is, let's say there's a sound that you might, a person with hearing loss might not recognize, and you're just pulled out of that conversation for even a moment. You've got that brain lag now, right? So you've got that brain lag of, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that. Now let me pay back attention. And oh man, like I got to now use my brain an effort to get back into the conversation. What did I miss? Because you're still piecing together some of that communication. And so it's super important to understand that that's what Gail's talking about in the fabulous hearing husband or the hearing spouse or whatever you want to call your communication partner, to be able to understand that. And I love, Shari, that you shared that your children, because they've watched you so young, that they're smart enough to implement the HEAR, right? And that acronym, and to implement things to start looking for that, because that's going to pay off whether they are married to somebody that has a hearing loss or not. We're all in busy environments and crowded environments. So I feel like that is going to benefit them and their loved ones, in the future as well. So just want to clarify that for people that are kind of watching as we're talking about some of these issues with hearing loss.
Well, and Shari, I love what you said about, getting hearing aids to kind of be a better model of hearing loss for your children, because, we see that, generational difference or that generational change. And I also think that the stigma is lessening. I've been an audiologist for 8 years compared to, things that I've heard prior to my career or whatever. I do think that this attitude is contagious. It's the more you know, and the more people that you can connect with.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I mean, I do feel like the stigma is going down, but I still feel like hearing loss relative to other disabilities still does remain quite stigmatized. It can still be something that people would make fun of. You can put it on a television show, someone doesn't hear something, or, oh, my hearing aid battery, and everybody laughs. If somebody with vision problems bumped into something, nobody would laugh.
Right.
So I think you're right, and that's good news, and hopefully that stigma just continues to drop. But I think all of us as people with hearing loss can be out there and be advocates for that, right? Living our life proudly and out loud, and showing that we can be successful, we can have fun, and we can communicate, even with hearing loss, is going to do a lot to lower that stigma too. So it's all of us together are going to really make that change.
And I think just by wearing your devices, an article that I wrote last week was called "When a Stranger Sees Your Hearing Aid," and you never know, and you will never know. So but trust that it will happen. Someone will spot that little hearing aid behind your ear, and you don't know that might be the day that just might spark them to act on what they've been debating with themselves for a long time. So just by wearing your hearing aids, wear them because you need them. I'm saying there's an extra benefit. You're an advocate and you don't know it, just if someone sees it, and it can make a difference. And
so good.
Yeah. I tell patients when they come in for a hearing aid consultation, especially if I can tell that they're like, I'm in my 40s and I, didn't think I would be doing this right now. And whatever, I say, go to the grocery store and look for hearing aids. Look at everybody's head in the grocery store. You will be shocked how many people have hearing aids on every day around you that you don't notice. I probably notice more because I'm like, oh, that's hanging out of that guy's ear, or that, what brand is that one, or whatever. But I think that's comforting for people too. Like, this is not something that nobody is doing. Everyone is wearing hearing aids, and everyone has hearing loss at some point. And so just kind of making that more known, because they are really small and easy to hide. And if you have any hair, sometimes you don't notice it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, this has been really good conversation, and we're so glad that you guys could join us today. But we have one last thing. So again, this is their book, Here and Beyond. So go ahead and grab a copy of theirs. But share with the viewers where they can actually purchase your book.
Well, the book is really available everywhere. It's in bookstores, it's in libraries, it's on Amazon. The best way to find all the links, I guess, would be to go to our website, which is hereandbeyond.com. And there you can click through to many of the different locations. And it's also available as an audiobook. So
nice.
People said to us, why would you have an audiobook for people with hearing loss? And it's not just for people with hearing loss, obviously, the book, but it's also a good training tool, right? A good auto rehab tool if you're listening to the book and reading along. So it's an opportunity for that as well.
Yeah, we would hope that, my apologies.
No,
we would hope. We would hope and encourage you as hearing care professionals who are watching this, as many of your colleagues are doing, have this as a resource in your waiting room. I mean, we did not write this book to become best-selling authors or to be rich. Definitely not. We wrote it because it's needed. And we know the impact that this book has on people's lives because we hear from them every day. And having it in your waiting room, something for them to read, or even give it as loaners, or even you can resell it. We don't care. We just want people with hearing loss to have access to the strategies that they need to live a more skillful life with hearing loss.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely put that link in our comments. Right now, we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, X, and then also on LinkedIn. So we will put that in the comments so that way people know where to purchase your book. But we appreciate it. And thank you guys for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you.